Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Catechumens Depart. I'm Eric Anderson.
And I'm Father Mark Kozak from the Assumption of the Holy Virgin Mary Orthodox Church in South Philadelphia.
Thank you, Father. Welcome back, everyone. It's nice to see you again, or be joined by you. I guess we can't really see you. We can pretend. I do want to point out that Father Mark is wearing some very snazzy Albert Einstein socks today.
That's right. They are Albert Einstein stocks.
We're hoping this ups the quality of our conversation at least 10%.
And in my case, for myself, that would be great. So.
Me too. I need 20%.
I'm not going to be greedy.
You guys didn't get to see the dogs this morning, but that's okay. They're here, as is Kim behind the camera, as always. So last week we wrapped up a little bit of conversation on the American sort of religious experience, and this week we wanted to kind of move forward into what's a little maybe more general and or contemporary, and talk about what Father Mark has termed the civic religion of America. We saw our Protestant and puritanical and, sort of polyglot? No, that's whatever. Anyway, we came from a lot of things here. So it's a new thing that hadn't really been tried, a mixture of different peoples of different kind of religions, not under a strict religious hierarchy. So that was kind of the Enlightenment experience that or experiment that we came from. And that has led us to have a kind of peculiar civic religion, which you had begun to kind of touch on at the end of last week.
I think it's important for us to understand how this civic religion still works. Mm-hmm. This really came into maturity after World War II. When we were one of the, superpowers and victors of the war, and a world superpower. And what went along with that was our own little setup on who our heroes were and what days we celebrated and how does this mechanism of America work. Mm-hmm. And so I grew up in the 60s and the early 70s where this was still happening.
It was still being codified?
It was still not necessarily codified, because I think it's never really been, actually it has been codified, because it's been codified to the nth degree with the very famous specialty group of the month club that we have. So every month has to have a specialty group.
Yes.
Which is okay on the one hand, but on the other hand, it gets you, in America, you're going to leave somebody out. Mm-hmm. So that's a problem.
Yeah.
But getting back to civil religion, our beliefs in our government, our way of looking at our culture has a religious undertone. Mm-hmm. In America, and we start with our own saints with a small s, those who have gone before us and who have represented America, and including our own saints on Mount Rushmore, our memorials in our capital city of Washington, D.C. Here in Philadelphia itself is a memorial in itself of independence. Yeah. Because not only was the Declaration signed here, but also the Constitution was written here. Mm-hmm. And this is where our Congress met regularly for the first time. And
but I remember the first time I went to the Franklin Institute, we went when we first moved here, and you walk in and there's a giant idol of Ben Franklin. Mm-hmm. Is what that is. And as somebody coming from art and art history and a tiny bit of understanding of iconography, like that's what that is. It's a giant icon or idol of like a small s saint. And as is all of the people, as are all of the people around City Hall.
Yes. So they have their own holidays. These holidays can be made or they can be unmade for various reasons. Now, what makes this dangerous is, and this is dangerous in the sense of someone's spiritual life and being balanced in spiritual life, is that this becomes their spiritual life.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks everything works this way. So one example of this are the protesters now. It's the other side of the coin. The saints obviously are not the people that they're tearing down the statues of. Those are not the saints. Those are the demons or the devils. But they're doing the same thing. They're not creating their own special civil religion. They just turn the coin, and then it's the same thing again.
Right.
You have the same religious undertones to it. It functions like a religious institution, but it has as much in common with a religious institution as that car out there, which is none.
You mean spiritually? Because
spiritual.
Formally, it has a ton in common.
Well,
with
it functions as like a religious institution.
It has gatherings.
But there's no God. Well,
Right.
Actually, that's not true.
Yeah, there is.
There is a God. There could be money. Could be the God. Power can be God. Being a superpower can be God. Being the only superpower can be a God. Does this sound familiar? This is the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and so on. So this is all wound up into this package of civil religion that we still live in. We still live this way. And our ancestors came to this country and were thrown into this. And by the second and third generation, they had bought into it also. So
do you think that America, as it is structured, I was thinking about this earlier, sort of in preparation for our conversation today. Do you think America, I don't know, in some ways it like eats religions?
Well,
it's that because of its structure of I cannot think of the right word for it today, but because of its religious freedom or whatever, that's not the right thing, but because everybody's sort of theoretically on the same page, because it's non-hierarchical, because essentially our civic religion is one of individualist self-pleasure, which leads to consumerism and things like that, typically. My friend and I were discussing that, like, he grew up Catholic, and post-Vatican II, when the priest turned around and faced the parishioners, it became, I mean, that's a meaning shift. It's not just a...
Well, but
it became a consumer model.
Yeah, it became a consumer model because the Catholic Church made an error in its liturgy in explaining it. So my question for the Catholic Church now, as it was when this happened, to my Catholic friends is, where are you going?
Yeah.
Because that's the question. It's not the question that you turn around and you're listened to by the people. That's not why the priest is there. If you are there to go somewhere, then it would be actually nice to go in the same direction. Yeah.
It's like he's at the prow of the ship.
Right. And the church, the Christian church, was a ship. It's one of its iconic names. Its iconic
Yeah, it's a vessel.
Yeah, it's a vessel, and its job is to move towards heaven. And the priest's job is to be at the point of that, to lead people to do that.
But you see every religion that comes to America seems to sort of succumb to this. Because
I'll tell you one thing that usually happens.
Yeah.
Each faith has to buy partially into the American dream, both the good side part of it and the bad side part of it. So the good side is that the state is not going to mess around with your faith directly. That's the good side. The bad side is by the time your faith and your particular group have been here 30 to 60 years, the second and third generation, is that you're going to lose 90% of your people.
Yeah.
So your churches are going to be mostly empty, and you're going to have to adjust to this. About 10% of Americans go to church regularly. I'm going to say it again. 10% of Americans go to church regularly.
I would have actually thought it was less at this point.
It's been a relatively solid number for a number of years. I'm not saying everyone else is lost. I'm not saying that everyone else doesn't believe in God. There is some kind of belief of a good chunk of Americans, but what they exactly believe in is they're not quite sure.
Right, it's unclear.
So if they're not sure, then I find it hard as a clergyman and someone that represents our faith that talking to them about it, because they're not sure. So this is what we have to talk about first. What do these things mean, and how does this relate to your life as a person that lives in America?
Yeah.
That lives in, quote, freedom of religion, unquote. But you have civil religion.
Yeah.
You have manifest destiny, which we'll talk about this time or next time. You have a lot of other interesting things that have gone on and are going on here, which have nothing to do with faith. Right. And actually, they have something to do with the some of the wrong things that are going on. Some of the bad things that are going on.
What do you mean?
We like to throw the word justice around. That's an interesting word nowadays. We have a whole department of that in our country. We also have a whole third of our government is devoted to that. Yeah. So how's that supposed to work?
Well, my understanding here is, if I can jump in, is that in the Judaic tradition, in the Old Testament, especially, there's a great deal of talk about justice, especially in the Psalms and all of that, right? And that idea of justice, we're always crying out for that, is that God would come and restore his proper order. Right. And I feel like in our society, the idea of justice has been perverted to mean retribution. It seems to, at least certainly when I hear justice for so-and-so or whatever, it tends to mean, in my read of it or in the demands that are being made, smash these people because these other people got smashed.
Yeah. And this is what rolls into the civil religion mishmash. Rolls into that. Oh, the Puritans came with their indentured servants. People in Jamestown brought in the first African slaves. Oh, there's another group coming in. And they acquired their class below them. It was supposed to be a classless society. We're supposed to have a classless society in America. That doesn't, it's not possible. And it's certainly not a meritocracy. That's certainly not true. No. I'm not sure what it is exactly. But
On bad days, I'd say a trash fire, but
Well, but that's
that's on bad days.
yeah.
Yeah.
But the point here is that there was someone below me.
Yeah.
So half of my ancestors came and worked in the coal mines and the steel mills and the railroads.
Yeah.
Actually, most of my ancestors did that.
Yeah.
When they came here. So what? I don't want to say what's wrong with America.
I think that's fair. I think it's pretty clear that there's a lot of things
But there are
wrong
a
with
lot
America.
of things wrong, yeah. But I'd like us to know how this works, how it really works in our day-to-day life and in our religious life, because it's not something that you can turn your head on. We're learning this in the what's going on with the virus right now, and relative to churches and faith and so on. For those of us that have, the Orthodox Church has a unique history in America. We're the only faith group that has gone from west to east.
Right.
We went the other way. We came to Alaska in the 1750s. Fur traders came in and baptized the people that they met, and had some kind of relationship with them. And then by the 790s, they brought in the first missionaries, and then they went west from Alaska to San Francisco to finally to New York and Chicago and the whole everywhere else. So this is how we came to America, and then our immigrant ancestors came the regular way. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the many things that I think gives us a different view in Orthodoxy.
Yeah, it's because the Orthodox people weren't necessarily wrapped up in all of the things the nasty things that you mentioned earlier. It's like they didn't come over as slave owners or whatever.
No, they didn't.
Owning plantations and all of this, which I think can sometimes very easily get conflated in some people's minds with Christianity equals this.
Well, that whole idea of narrowing Christianity down into some kind of program,
right?
Which happened in the 60s and the 70s. You had the Jesus movement. You had.
My dad was part of that.
Lots of things. There are lots of things that are a part of this. I'm trying to think of the political liberation theology, which has nothing to do with Christianity.
Right.
It has nothing to do with Christ.
Right.
It has to do with something is being made into a program. And that's also another face of civil religion. Oh, we can make this religious so-called belief into a program that's good for that has the civic good, in mind.
Well, that's a feature of scientific rationalist modernity.
Yeah.
That's everything is viewed through that lens.
Yeah. So the whole idea that we're here, America is here to save the world. Which is
that manifest destiny?
That is manifest destiny in a little nutshell.
The shining city on the hill.
This shining city on the hill. All of North America belongs to us, and then we go out and we acquire more power and more land and
spread democracy.
And
whether you want it or not.
Not particularly interested usually whether you want it.
Yeah.
So how does that work? Does the world need superpowers so that they won't have power vacuums and everything else, and they need to function politically that way? I don't know. I know how it works. I can tell you how it works vis-a-vis religion in America for the last 400 years, on how manifest destiny came about and why it came about. But I'm not sure of answering some other things. Well, we'll talk about that maybe. We'll see if we want to talk about it.
I'm going to jump over to another track real quick.
Oh, no, another track.
Yeah, but it should intersect with that track. In fact, I think it's something that we need to talk about. It was super important for me coming into Orthodoxy anyway. The first time I read the Paschal Homily of St. John Chrysostom, it's a radically different understanding of what atonement means than what I grew up with. Pardon me. Because right now we hear a lot about America's original sin of racism. That's sort of what we're on right now. And embedded in that is a particular idea of original sin, which comes out of a Reformed or Calvinist understanding of what sin means, which I think probably comes out of a more legal Catholic framework of guiltiness. And by that I mean, I'm not a Protestant theologian. I took some classes at Fuller Seminary, but that doesn't make me a Protestant theologian.
No?
No, but my basic...
I did too, but just one. I went to a conference there. Just one.
Ooh, I took 2 classes. I'm like slightly... We were trying to figure this out at lunch, and I couldn't remember all of the acronym, but the Calvinist understanding of things is wrapped up in an acronym TULIP, which is total depravity. Oh shoot! Now I'm gonna botch this. Well, let's just start with the first one. Total depravity.
So we're totally depraved.
Totally depraved, right. Which is a horrendous term.
Well, it's a horrendous term because Genesis 1:1, we're made in the image and likeness of God.
Yeah.
Any questions about that?
Yeah.
Because if you have a question about that, then you have a major theological problem.
Yeah. And to me, the idea...
and you're starting from the beginning.
Right.
You're making the wrong error. Okay, what does image and likeness means? It means that we all have the image of God, each one of us.
Yeah. Not...
we work towards the likeness, but we all have the image. And I'm talking about icon image, not image of the sense of, something that's flat and veneered and everything else. I'm talking about an image that shoots through you, that grabs you, and that's what that sermon does at Pascha.
Yeah.
And just to think that we can come at the 11th hour and we will be welcome to his table. Because many of us will come at the 11th hour. We won't be on time. So, yeah, totally depraved. What is that?
Honey, can you look?
What does that mean?
May I see your phone, honey? I'm sorry. I'm gonna do a little. I'm breaking the fourth wall or something right now.
Are you like you're using your?
I have to.
I'm
using I'm cheating right now.
He's cheating.
I'm totally cheating. I have to look up the acronym because it's,
and I heard it, but it was a very long time ago.
Yeah,
it might have been before some people here were born.
All right, let's see.
Maybe all of you.
Lip theology. Okay, let's see. Let's get it. The 5 points of Calvinism. And this is embedded, I'm bringing this up because this is embedded in the way that we, in our civic religion, understand things.
Our civic religion is very Calvinistic.
Total depravity. This simply means that man is dead. Wow, right. That is rugged.
That's not true. So, and
we're born in sin unless we are born again. No man who is not a Christian can do good works.
I see.
Oh, this is rough. I may have gone to like a really polemic site, and I'm sorry. Unconditional election is the second one.
Unconditional election.
Yes.
That's another interesting one. And that came from where?
This is from...
No, not. This is a rhetorical question.
Yeah. Well, God chooses to give some people eternal life.
And he got it. Where did God do this?
Probably, I guess, before the dawn of time.
I see.
And he chooses who he will choose.
144,000?
Maybe it comes from, it's...
that was a good number.
Limited atonement.
Limited.
Yeah, so that means that's the L in tulip. Let's see, yes. This is a long article.
So I'm going to be partially saved? Is that what that
No,
means?
it means that if this is given for you and for many for the remission of sins, right? That we hear every week in the liturgy. Well, it means many. It doesn't mean all. So it means that God has already decided that there's a certain batch of the people that he made that are just going to go to hell.
Well,
which is a little rough.
Yeah, that's not how God, number one, that's not how God works.
Yeah.
Because God does not work in our time. And literally, did we talk about this in the Orthodox Church? We did. We talked about it in one of our classes before, but let's say it again.
Yeah.
The deacon comes to me every Divine Liturgy and says, it is time to begin the service to the Lord.
Yeah.
Kyrios Estin, it's God's time. We don't understand how that works as human beings. The saints get a little glimpse of it. Yeah. And we can read from the saints and I've listened to people who are saintly, who are saints, and they sort of get it a little bit. But we're not talking about why would anyone sanely wrap themselves up into this idea of messing around with God's time, because it is just it's utterly not so. So in the Orthodox Church, we're trying to say this time and time again. That's this time kind of time, not God's time.
I got you started on time, Father Mark.
We had a whole class on that.
I know, many classes.
Listen to that. We had 6 classes on
Yes.
that. We did. But the point here, we have creeds so we can have some kind of understanding on who God is, how God works. The creeds don't mention any of this stuff. Right. And there's a reason why they don't. Yeah. Because it's wrong. Yeah. Right. Period. Yeah. Sometimes it's so off base that it comes around as a first or second century heresy. Well, and it deforms. It deforms. And then it warps. It warps people. It warps churches. It warps everything around it. It's sort of like a black hole of pseudo-Christian pseudo theology. Yeah. It's not real. It's not in the sense of that word. It's not. And maybe that sounds a little harsh, but I mean, the 5 points of Calvinism are also like incredibly harsh. And certainly that's not to say that every Protestant denomination subscribes to those 5 points. I bring those up to point out, I keep pointing out, there's a big window behind us. You guys can't see it. Very nice. It's a beautiful window. There's some trees and the plant in the window. Anyway. And anyway, the oldest army hospital in the United States we're looking right at. Directly across the street. Right. But I sort of brought all of that up to interject into our conversation because there is an idea of original sin in all of that we see going on and getting played out outside in the riots and in the protests and in the civic religion and in this iconoclastic movement against the civil religion that's happening right now. Because reality is fractal and patterned and repeats. There's this idea that there's an original guilt that you are born with that is also part of this sort of Calvinistic train of thought, right? That you're born
not into, as I understand it, the Orthodox idea of, and you can articulate this a little bit better than me. We're probably going to go over a couple minutes today, guys, so bear with us.
Oh, no.
Oh, heavens. The Orthodox idea is that we are born into a world that has been corrupted by sin, and it corrupts us when we do it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the opposite idea is that we are born guilty of the sin of Adam, which may seem small, but it's actually a huge difference, because that means you can be guilty of something you didn't do. And you can see that in the civic religion now.
Yes.
When people say, well, you're guilty of the original sin, America's original sin of racism. And that's, I think, founded in a skewed idea of what ancestral or original sin is. Can you kind of give us
Yes.
a better lens onto how to look at that?
Well, I'd like to ask a few questions.
Oh, I'm supposed to ask you questions.
And these are semi-rhetorical.
Okay.
Does Jesus Christ shame and blame, which is a part of connecting with original sin?
Yeah.
Does God ever tell the earth will go into utter damnation because of what happened? Does God shame us into feeling guilty about what we've done with ourselves? See, this whole idea of shame and guilt, and Jesus does none of these things.
I know.
I mean, it's like you look at, what would Jesus do? Well, duh. Why don't you look at it?
He'd go have dinner with the prostitutes and the tax
he went to have
collectors.
dinner with the prostitutes, the tax collectors, all these. He went out and he was with the people. He didn't incite riots. He talked to women. He talked to Samaritans. He lifted up the poor, the weak, the weary. What part of this we don't understand? I mean. And the original sin is we don't do that.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And we live in a fallen world. Now, is it a bad world? No.
God saw that it was good, in fact.
God said it was good. In fact, God said it was good 6 times, which is a lot.
That's pretty emphatic.
Yeah. So, but the temptation is out there to make the wrong choice, to do the wrong thing. But I can't judge you.
Right.
As a spiritual father of many people, first thing I tell them when they come to confession is that I'm not here to judge you. Only God will judge you. I'm not here to do that. I'm not here to use. I've told people to their face. I said, "Do you know that God is not interested in guilt and how guilty you feel? God is interested about you coming up and meeting Him, and rather than how guilty you feel because of XYZ that you did." And I'm not saying that XYZ should be put aside and not forgotten about. We need to fess up to what we do with ourselves.
Yeah,
we're responsible for that. This belongs to. I used to go like this with my guys in the military. I said, "Who does this belong to?" And they would say, "Oh, the Navy, sir." I said, "That's almost a good answer." I know it belongs to God. It doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to my parents or anyone else. It belongs to God. And we are stewards for it. And we live in this fallen world. And if you don't think it's not a fallen world, Americans, and anyone else, stick your head out the door. All right? Really. Yeah. Really. It's a fallen world.
Yeah.
And our job as Orthodox Christians is to help lift it up. That's why we bless things. That's why we have churches. That's why we go. We go places together. We bless every good event that happens in our life. We have icons which are windows to heaven in our houses and in our churches, and so on. We're here to help lift up the earth.
Yeah.
And that's what will, of course, happen in the second coming. But we don't get too wrapped up into that, because that was a theological. We'll talk about that another time.
Woo!
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be a deep rabbit hole.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we should probably sort of wind down. So.
Original sin, you can't. Wow.
I know. If we.
Sleepy.
What's that? Oh, I know. And we've put the dog to sleep, Father Mark. I mean, we didn't put the producer to sleep.
Well, but
Thank God.
I think she's
nodding a little, so I don't know. Hopefully we didn't put you guys to sleep. We thank you, as always, for joining us.
Always good to see you. Come back again. Tell your friends.
Yes, please do. Like our videos, subscribe to our channel, all the YouTube things, and we will see you next week. Until next time, Catechumens Depart.